back with another CWE Video Podcast with episode 24, and right before we hit record, Travis informed me we have spent 6 months of our life doing this. That means 6 months of my life sitting next to Travis Cole. So...
spent more than 6 months sitting next to me. Just here instead of in a car or, whatever.
Drive the bullet a little bit deeper.
Which has happened more? You recording CWE podcast episodes, or you having sex with a girl? Which number's higher?
Definitely CWE Video Podcast. I live with him. I can attest that he has recorded more CWE Video Podcasts. But a man that has recorded a lot of audio, we don't get to see his face too often, but we do get to hear his sweet, sultry voice on TSN 1290. Welcome, Mike Young, to the program.
Well, thanks for inviting me on. Looking forward to talking whatever you guys want to talk about. The sex life apparently is on the table, so
it is always on the table.
Yeah.
Women are not on the table for Travis, but making fun of his non-existent sex life is. This is kind of switching things around because in the last 6-7 years, you've probably interviewed me at least 3-4 dozen times now.
Yeah.
Now I get to put
I've done you a lot of favors. So
yes.
What time is getting
Time to start calling those ones in.
So now I get to put you here and ask you uncomfortable questions about you and your sex life for the world to see.
Well, my sex life does get uncomfortable. Page 258 of the Kama Sutra.
For her.
The wrestling world is lighting up as we count down the days to WrestleMania. We are on the proverbial road to WrestleMania, as they say, so there's a lot of things happening and a lot of things going on as we get close to that date. Terry Funk was on Raw to promote WrestleMania as they continue to hype this angle with Dean Ambrose and Brock Lesnar. Can he beat the Beast? And it's been kind of cool. They used Mick Foley last week. They used Terry Funk yesterday. Who knows when this will air? Maybe a week and a half ago, depending on the airing of this podcast.
Yeah.
But it's kind of cool that they're bringing in some of the guys to do things of this nature, and it kind of ties in with what we talked about with the Hall of Fame. They're bringing guys from different eras, and they're putting them on the current product, the current brand, to give that wide range to every generation of wrestling fan. Terry Funk's somebody we haven't seen a whole lot of on WWF TV in the last 25 years, so it's kind of cool to see.
70s.
He's been wrestling for 7 years, but he was only really highlighted on WWF TV in the late 90s when he was doing the Chainsaw Charlie.
Chainsaw Charlie shit, right? Yeah, and that's really it, other than
he had a little
WWE runs.
He had a brief spot in
WCW.
2006 when they did the One Night Stand.
Oh, ECW stuff?
Yeah, that's right.
Because he teamed with who did he team with?
The Dreamer?
Yeah,
I think it was.
It was him and Dreamer against Edge and Foley, was it?
He did some WCW stuff. Like after the Chainsaw Charlie, he did a feud with Flair in WCW.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And he was in WCW. He was like in WWF the mid 80s, but he kind of got let go right before the boom.
Yeah, didn't really.
And then he did
Big
NWA in
wave.
Japan and ECW, of course, which he helped put on the map with their first pay-per-view.
Yeah.
He, of course, did his retirement in Japan in the late 90s.
Which one?
Continued to wrestle for another 20 years.
Yeah.
Which one?
Wasn't he retired when he was going into the angle with Flair for the NWA World Title in the late 80s as well? Didn't he come out of retirement for that?
Well, yeah, that wasn't so much retirement. He had to make Roadhouse and Over the Top, so that was he was like man, like two of the greatest movies ever to hit theaters right there, Over the Top and Roadhouse. Like if you haven't seen those, you're not a guy, as far as I'm concerned. You might as well own a purse.
Is that perhaps where Robbie Royce and T.J. Bratt and Shane Madison have all got these grand ventures of retirement over the years with their 8, 9, 10, 11 retirements? So they follow in the footsteps
I think
of
so.
Terry
I
Funk?
think they're trying to mirror his
Hollywood aspirations.
Royce is kind of probably envisioning himself a little bit like Terry Funk, doing the hardcore throughout his entire career.
Sure, yeah,
Yeah, but Terry Funk's still wrestling sometimes.
Yes,
not as much.
depending on the PO and the circumstances,
Yeah.
I suppose.
Did you see the segment, Mike?
Yeah, and Terry Funk, much like Mick Foley the week before gave him a barbed wire baseball bat, Terry Funk bestowed upon him a weapon perfectly usable at WrestleMania and a chainsaw. So obviously throwing back to the Chainsaw Charlie gimmick.
I think you could give me a chainsaw and I still wouldn't want to fight Brock Lesnar. I still would like my chances.
Well, they have highlighted and showed his past work with Combat Zone Wrestling, where he was doing all that crazy hardcore and extreme stuff. I was watching over the dinner table on Saturday night the Nick Mondo spot with the weed whacker on the stomach. So maybe he'll bust that Combat Zone special out for Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania.
He also did the one with the forehead on CZW.
With the weed whacker?
Yeah, I think it might have been a weed whacker or something else, but they ran it across his forehead. It was like,
He'll do something big.
Yeah.
Like you know damn well. Like I'm really thinking that something's gonna happen in that match that'll be the highlight of the card. That's my.
Kind of has to be.
Yeah, it kind of has to be. It's kind of a on paper compared to the last 2 years, it looks like a relatively lackluster WrestleMania. To be honest,
I think in terms of match quality,
I don't know. It looks
really
awesome.
good. Well, people are complaining it doesn't have like that big star matchup, but I think like overall, you got you got AJ Styles, you got Chris Jericho, you got Steen and Generico.
Right.
Like, there's going to be some real show stealers. And you got guys that busted their ass for 10, 15, 20 years on the independents.
Oh, yeah.
Killing themselves in matches in front of 1,000 people for very little money. Now getting that opportunity at their first WrestleMania in front of 100,000 people, they're going to be pulling out the big guns. So I think we're going to be very, very surprised. I think the general public's going to be very surprised with the WrestleMania they do receive in a couple weeks.
This one kind of throws me back to like the old WrestleMania 6, 5, 4 days of having 12 or 13 matches on a card, and these matches would go 5, 6, 7 minutes a piece. But for the last several years, this is the most matches we've seen on a WrestleMania card in a long time. And you'd think they usually just throw everyone in the Battle Royal to get them on the card. That Battle Royal still exists, but then you've got every single title being defended, and with the exception of the Intercontinental title, they're all being defended in basically like singles matches, just tag matches, just one team versus one team. World title, U.S. title, Intercontinental title, all the belts are on the line, and women's title, obviously. So it's just so many. I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll bring back the women's title at some point.
Now, my question to go back to the Dean Ambrose Terry Funk segment is they're bringing out the big guns, Terry Funk, Mick Foley, to really drive the point home that Dean Ambrose has a shot against Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
From the outside looking and not following the product super closely, I say there's no way Brock Lesnar's being defeated at WrestleMania. He's their marquee monster.
Yeah.
He's their money draw. But Dean Ambrose has arguably been the most over babyface they've had in a year and a half.
Yeah,
if you listen to the reaction he gets every night, it's a lot stronger consistently than anybody else on the show. So is this an opportunity to pull the trigger and build a star and have him beat someone the caliber of Brock Lesnar on the grand stage when the most eyes are watching the product in hopes of building that next Steve Austin, that next Rock, and hope he explodes, or do you play it safe and keep your money with Brock Lesnar?
I believe they switched it from a street fight to last man standing too. So
I think
you could do a finish where he looks good, but doesn't actually have he doesn't have to pin Brock Lesnar either.
Yeah,
which might be a spoiler, like to switch it to that.
I think they'll just keep him looking strong, but still put Brock over at the end of the day, kind of thing. I think that's what they would look at going into. I could be wrong, I wouldn't lay money down on that, but.
And they still have left the angle open with Bray Wyatt and Brock Lesnar that they've been building since the Rumble.
There's a back injury.
Yeah, so if they're going to revisit that, there's of course the possibility for that to be involved in that segment.
Are any of those guys on the card other than maybe the
Battle
Royal?
in the Battle Royal.
Which is crazy to me. They're such a hot act.
Yeah.
They could have been the next big act for WWE. Like them and the Shield were so hot 2 years ago, and they just been up and down, up and down.
They should have been. Bray Wyatt should have been the guy to take over the Undertaker, his spot at WrestleMania, and it was derailed by Cena. In his debut at WrestleMania, he took that loss. The next year, he took the loss to the Undertaker.
Yeah,
and he hasn't been able to, make a home for himself. He doesn't need to. He's a guy with a gimmick that doesn't ever need a title around his waist. He can just exist. The family gimmick is great, and he still maintains the ability to maintain being over, even the fact that he's been completely had his legs taken out from him time and time and time again. It's depressing to watch him take 2 steps forward and then 5 steps backwards.
Which I don't understand, because you see a guy like a Fandango that they try to push to the moon. It clearly wasn't working, so they cut his legs out right from under him right away, which you can rationalize
Ascension
that.
or whoever.
Yeah, but Bray Wyatt was always really over. Like when they first brought those guys in, like just the atmosphere and energy in the arena, that didn't start to fizzle until they started cutting their legs out.
Yeah.
So there was no reason to do so. They were still on the rise, and with that group, with Harper and Rowan, Bray Wyatt never needs to lose.
No.
Like when he does, it could be at a WrestleMania.
Yeah,
when those guys are not at ringside. But when you've got 3 big monsters surrounding you, there's no reason he should ever lose a match.
Yeah, you should keep the baby strong.
It should be a very few and far between. Like the babyface can fight through that group and get to him, and ultimately it's too much.
Get fucked, yeah.
He hasn't won a feud since he's been on TV with WWE. He loses every feud. He's won some matches, but then they 50-50 book it so that you just takes the loss back a week or 2 later, or the next pay-per-view cycle. Roman Reigns, John Cena, Dean Ambrose, everybody who's been in a feud with Bray Wyatt has come out on top.
Yeah.
You know,
And he wasn't established as a guy that was beating all the baby faces for that to mean as much.
No.
So it's really bizarre to me because he is a very unique character. There's nobody else on the show like him, and there's not going to be anybody else on the show like him. So I don't know why not protect him. Like, a good heel will always keep his heat regardless of wins or losses, but I don't think they really maximize that potential to get the most out of him as a heel, putting these baby faces over.
No, and that's why it's so hard for WWE, at least in the last several years, is to build a strong heels. Is they have so much problem building heels that win credibly and don't lose. Brock Lesnar was the closest thing to that, but he flipped to a babyface because they were booking him that way.
WWE or WWF has always been push the superhero babyface, where WCW is have the heel champion and the babyface chase the champion with the payoff winning the title. And it's always kind of been like that. It's Hogan, and then it was Bret Hart, and then it was Austin, and then it was John Cena. They always have that top babyface protected, and they never have a heel work on top of the company long enough to establish that. They did it a little bit with CM Punk when he was a champion for that long period of time, but he really wasn't the main attraction when he was world champion. Like, John Cena was still getting top billing.
Yeah, he wasn't even, I remember saying half the pay-per-views he wasn't even the main event when he was champion.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show that the top baby face is their kind of focus. Is that a public relations thing?
I think a lot of it
Probably
is what
not.
that is, because
Yeah,
they send their
just-
champion to Make-A-Wish and just do public appearances. And
it's
No
easier to
disrespect
sell.
to Bray Wyatt.
It's easier to sell. It's easier to sell babyface merch than it is to sell heel merch.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's.
I'll tell that to the NWO.
But if you look at Bray Wyatt, though, he can still be a strong heel champion with having that group surrounding him, and the babyface still look like a superhero, always fighting against that heel group to try to get to the champion and then eventually unseating him. That's what they did with Flair and the Horsemen for so many years.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the formula is there. It's just a matter of if you want to do it or not.
I think I just like the idea of having somebody even Triple H, even though he's a heel, he's somebody they can put out on Leno, on Conan, on stuff like that, and do these interviews. Do you see Bray Wyatt doing those? I don't know if they think that he's the right fit for something like that. So it seems like they tend to, especially this time of year, try to center it around.
So to put it into comparison, instead of me doing interviews, it'd be like sending Wildman Furbo to do interviews. Which maybe we should do sometime.
I didn't know I could choose which I could have on.
If you'd like to have Wildman Furbo, I will make that arrangement for you.
I get Furbo and Broda together.
Depending on if Furbo's wife is what her mood is that day, he may or may not make it.
I would maybe put them live on air. Maybe make it as a podcast special only.
At least have that 10-second delay with someone with his finger on the sensor button.
Todd Bullet Club, just leave off the Todd part. I say you have the Bullet Club.
As we talk about the Wyatt family, on Raw, a fan was kicked out for trying to fight Braun Strowman.
After everyone off air, right?
Yeah, when it went off air.
He actually legitimately hit him. He didn't just try to fight him.
He actually hit him.
There's videos of him landing shots.
This psychology I've never understood, because in my years of bouncing, like when I used to work at a live in the district in downtown Winnipeg, with Dirksen. But when I was 19 years old, I was in good shape, but I was the smallest on the team.
Yeah.
There was a lot of jacked up big boys, like 6'8", 340 pounds, geared right up. Nobody would ever pick a fight with me.
No,
ever. But they would always pick a fight with the 6'8" dude, and it would just boggle my. I've never understood.
That's because they thought they knew some shit.
Maybe.
Why is the little guy employed here? He's got to know something. Someone's got to be.
I was just there to talk to girls.
He's got a black belt on underneath that jacket. I know he fucking does.
The token white guy.
So Braun Strowman is probably the largest man they have on their roster. So
yeah,
but he's the greenest, so that's why they picked him.
Yeah, but a world-class strongman. So you pick the biggest guy in the roster and you throw a punch at him. Chris was mentioning off camera, maybe Sorry?
It's playground rules. You find the biggest, baddest guy on the playground and you punch him in the mouth.
Yeah, but this is a fan. It's not like they're going to have to associate with each other.
No, but when you're drunk with your buddies and everything else.
That is the psychology, which I still don't understand.
Playground rules. You find the biggest guy and you try to
probably a dare, you know what I mean? That the guy probably lost a fucking round of golf or something. Like, you got to punch Braun Strowman at the next house show, and that was it, right?
But regardless of how intoxicated you get, you're going to jail.
Yeah.
B, and most importantly, B, more so scary than jail, there's a chance he might hit you back.
Yeah.
And if that guy hits you back, it's not going to end well.
It's going to be permanent damage. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you'll be retarded the rest of your life.
Luckily,
well,
luckily, from what I understand, he was not hit back, and he played it cool. But there's a lot of guys that would have drilled him.
Oh, fuck yeah.
I think in WWE they're very, very adamant to their
step
talents.
away from that,
just step away from it as much as you want to.
Yeah, it's not like
it depends
15
on the
years ago.
guy. I mean,
Yeah.
we look back to the old Winnipeg Arena show here when Eddie Guerrero, the recovering
beer on
alcoholic,
him,
someone poured a beer on him in the front, and he leapt up, jumped over that guardrail, and just like a dog on top of a bone, you know. And
But I think since then they've really
Yeah,
hammered that home.
that could be
5 to 10 years. They
That could
probably
be
do a little more.
what they said earlier too about him being the greenest guy. Is it's like, okay, maybe I take a shot at this guy, he hits me back, and I get a lawsuit.
No,
Yeah.
fuck. You're not thinking that.
Sort of
far.
unrelated.
That's stupid.
But you're in the radio industry, so maybe you got the inside scoop on a fan being ejected. What happened with the Power 97 guys when they got ejected? Do you ever get
it was
the
just
word on
it was just
the-
one guy.
the one guy. That guy was
and it
fucking
was,
annoying anyway.
What was his
I can't
name?
remember his name. It was Carson.
Carson.
Yeah,
Oh, that's right.
whatever his first name was, or maybe that
Yeah,
was.
so we did a couple interviews with him with Steiner
Yeah, I
and stuff
think
like
it
that, and he was
was
super cool. And then I remember being at the show and finding out he got ejected,
Yeah.
but nobody knew why. Like nobody knew the.
Oh, you didn't see it?
I saw it, but I don't remember like.
He shoved Dave
Shoved
Bautista.
He actually shoved him.
Yeah, he shoved him.
And
yeah.
he was
Tried to get in his
the
face.
story is that he just had a few too many drinks and
He's trying to go into business for himself
you
and
know
book an
that
angle.
was it.
It wasn't Power 97 like the radio sponsor and
Yeah,
advertiser
that's why
for the show?
he had the front row seats and he was removed from the.
Trying to book his own angle, basically.
You know, he was removed shortly thereafter from Power 97. So good on them for making the right call, and hopefully he learned not to do that. I mean, you represent when as a part of the media, when you're out in public, you're representing that station. You know, even if you're not wearing a Power 97 T-shirt, or I'm not wearing a TSN 1290 T-shirt, if I'm out. It's going to get back to the people.
Oh
higher
yeah,
up.
this day and age,
You acted like a jackass.
Yeah, he did.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like
Has he even
basically
been heard of
immediately.
since? Like he hasn't been back on.
If he's working, it's not in Manitoba any longer.
No.
So
Right.
he wasn't from here originally.
Yeah.
So he probably just went back to where he's from, found a different city. You know, the radio industry in Canada is very small, but there's a lot of second and third and fourth and fifth chances along the way for people.
Look at those
which
guys
is
like
good and bad.
Look at those guys like
depending on how you look at
Shadow
it.
and them that all just shuffle around station to station, and then they bury the station they were on last
Power
on the new
97
station.
had like a rough go there. So like that Shecky incident was like not too long after that.
No.
It's probably part of the rebranding. Like guys getting thrown
And
out. Guys
now they're
getting
doing syndicated programming and during prime time and stuff like the Alice Cooper show. Like something's going on there where.
Eddie Guerrero was also involved in that ladder match too, where a fan ran in and
Rob
like, pushed the
Van Dam,
ladder.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, on Raw. Yeah.
And he did it, you know,
He gave it
threw
a
a
few
shot at the
shots,
fan
yeah.
when he. But I mean, to me, that's a much different than the fan reaching over the guardrail. The fan is getting in the ring, and it's almost. You've seen it back in the WCW days a lot. When the NWO was running, there was a lot of run-ins during that time of fans trying to get in. Like, I don't know, just the fever pitch of the Monday Night Wars and what the NWO is attacking the fan favorites of WCW. People really took that personally.
Oh, fuck yeah.
I think it was fans more so being upset that they paid money to see Virgil.
That could be it. But I remember, I think it was Halloween Havoc '96, and a fan scaled the cage.
Oh yeah.
In the ring, like he went up there like Spider-Man, making these wrestlers basically look like takes you 20 minutes to get up the cage.
Check this out, dude.
He's up and over, and then Savage is basically like stomping him, like pushing him against the cage under the rope. To, basically like
fuck him
to
up.
show him like don't. Why did you do this? And also to keep him out of harm's way from anything happening to him while he's in there. Like
maybe that's why they expanded the NWO so much. They're just kind of like security to keep the Hogans and the Nashes safe. They're just kind of there to make sure.
Some of them may have just been fans that slipped through the.
They're just there to stand there and.
I don't know if I've ever seen it on an independent show. Like any I've been on, I don't think in 15 years I've ever seen that.
Chase had a thing in Fanny Cell where he gave Dude a good knee to the back to try to get in the ring.
Somebody tried to get in the ring on our last tour.
Yeah, and Chase just gave him a fucking shot.
I had to smack somebody too when he tried to get in the ring. I give him a stiff arm to keep him out of the ring.
That's a hot town.
Yeah, someone tried to get in the ring.
It's not a TV show with millions of people watching. When you're an independent wrestling show, you know, it's basically the people in the building.
It's a lot more intimate setting.
People aren't there to get themselves famous. You know, when you're. I mean, we've seen it in all sports. It's not just wrestling. There, you know, the guy who at the Bomber game tried to tackle the BC Lions player and just got completely shut down, like running out onto the field. You know, it's all across sports. You know,
Guy in Philadelphia tried to jump in the penalty box to fight Ty Domi.
Yeah,
that was awesome.
That was awesome.
He fell in and tied his
But
leg
an
on.
independent wrestling show, like Rookie Sports Bar, for example,
Sure.
back in the day, you could get drunk and beat up Brian Rich if you wanted to, and that's a win.
Oh,
So you think that
probably
would be a
about it,
time to
yeah.
give it a shot? Like, I'm going to go beat up a wrestler, or this guy that kind of pretends to be one. And
Yeah, like
that's the case of the smallest guy, though, right?
Right.
Yeah.
They're not looking to beat
There's nothing
him up,
to prove.
They're looking to beat Adam Knight up.
Would it be really
or,
funny?
or
It would be. I'd pop. I'd get my camera out over the entranceway and give it a record.
How much time do we got before our first break, Chris?
Well, you're at about 22 minutes now.
All right, we'll take that first break right now because I want to talk about some of the other big happenings going on and some moving and shaking on the rosters and, of course, the Hulk Hogan sex tape. And we are back. And before we talk any more professional wrestling, I actually have to offer an update to last week's podcast. One you'll be disappointed you missed once it goes to air. We had the Garber Snake, Jordan Garber, on the program for what was the best podcast we've ever done. This is on pace to beat it, but this was really, really good. And
We need a sequel.
yeah, well, as he gets older, more stories will develop. But we had him on the program. We had him download Tinder and start messaging girls while here on the podcast. And he actually secured himself a date. So he's going on a date this week with the girl he was having a conversation with right here on our podcast.
Did you get like a look at her?
Yeah, she was hot.
Chris was like,
You got to bring the camera out on the date. That's the only way to follow this.
Yeah.
Exactly. This has to be. What's that show? You know, where little, like blind date with little thought bubbles would pop up. And shit.
I remember that. That was solid.
Well, and it went up.
I would like scroll.
Jordan Garber brought blind date.
I would scroll through and then I'd get his opinion on their appearances and their life choices and things of that nature. He'd have some interesting commentary. So
See, did you tell him the trick that like we were telling Travis about on one of our tours? You gotta watch for the girls that take the picture with one leg in front of the other. That's an illusion, right? Because if they stand, legs side by side, and they still look like that they can walk through most doorways, then hey, right on, swipe left or whatever it is. I don't know which ones do you like, left or right?
swipe left if you like.
Yeah, so swipe left on those ones. If they're standing, kind of one foot in front of the other, one shoulder forward, lean down for the cans kind of thing. And cover the gut with the cans, then it's probably a bit of an illusion there, and that's probably a
general rule of thumb, like in the social media age. If you're on something like Tinder and you've got a hot body, you usually show it off.
Yeah, you'll show it. Yeah.
So
If there's only the face pic,
if it's like
Yeah,
if you get 6 profile pictures and it's all just like a different angle of your face this way and that way,
Yeah.
chances are you're hiding something.
Yeah.
You're hiding something.
The goods.
Hiding the goods.
You're hiding the goods.
Like, it's not the
fist up the snapper.
like Tinder's not a place where you're being a lady and you're being discreet. Like you're putting
guess
yourself
not,
out
hey?
there to possibly.
Some of them try to pretend like
Yeah, no, I've been engaged and married since that stuff's been out, so I've never really been out.
Have you ever had a Tinder account, Mike?
I have not.
No.
I'm common law. 8 years now, so.
So
me too,
I'd
actually.
possibly be causing relationship troubles if we had you download Tinder during the next commercial break.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, that's probably not going to happen.
It's just for podcast purposes. It's just not.
Yeah.
If you happen to keep it after you leave here, that's on you.
All
That's not on
entertainment,
me.
right?
This is all for research purposes.
All for research. Maybe that could lead to your own personal sex tape, which happened to be a big payoff to Hulk Hogan. See that nice segment
Holy
there?
Yeah.
fuck! Never get
That was
$150 million.
140. 115, but he got 25 more.
oh, that's right.
$140 million settlement.
His ex-wife doesn't get none of that.
She gets
No.
70%. She gets 70%, yeah.
what?
Why would she get 70% of his winnings?
I'd fucking bury her in the backyard. And not
She gets, because I can't remember what it was, but I was remembering that,
She probably got like 70% of whatever he used to have.
anything he makes now, she still gets to, I believe.
I don't think it's after the
There's
divorce
no
is
way.
finished.
No,
Once
that's-
it's closed
That's insanity.
and
That's like borderline
It's-
Tiger
it's-
Woods and
he lives in
there.
Florida. He can just
because
Dexter her out in the ocean.
Because she,
like I would.
the argument was that she made a lot of sacrifices for him to make all that money by raising their
But
children.
that's why you get the money for the time they were married.
Yeah.
I just remember hearing something very recently.
There's nothing
she
that
still
would,
gets
there's
paid.
no legal obligation to him, to her.
At this point.
That once that
I would
divorce
hope not.
is sealed.
Yeah.
And I remember that anything that if she can make the argument that it was money earned because of something he did while they were married, then she still gets some of it.
But this wasn't while they were married.
No.
The sex tape wasn't while they were married.
Well, no.
It was after.
That was after.
Okay.
After that very messy divorce.
But he's not getting
That's why you-
140 million for like
Yeah.
the profits of the sex tape. He's getting it because he
No,
never sleeps.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. But
that's why he
regardless.
was in this position where he was having sex with Bubba Love Sponge's wife, because he, according to him, he was in a very depressed place.
Yeah, Hogan's not the
due to
kind of
his
guy that would.
relationship, and his whack that his wife took all his money and was sleeping with a guy who was his son's Nick's friend. Like,
Yeah, Hogan
Yeah.
wouldn't have cheated on his wife while he's married. Not like that.
No. Wrestling.
Hogan's a polite guy, man. Like, did you watch that show when it was on? Hogan Knows Best.
He also only took vitamins and said prayers too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He like
that's half the battle. Like,
he had his neighbors over for barbecues and stuff, and they wouldn't eat the pork that he made because they were Jewish. Like. Fucking ignorant people, you know? He's nice enough to have you over and you're turning his food down. Whatever, though.
What are the chances that this whole ordeal was a work to milk a big payoff?
Well, Gawker, if Gawker loses this appeal process, because this will obviously go to appeals court, if they do lose this, that whole company may be out of business, which includes the site Jezebel, Deadspin, all those are owned by the same
Well, I don't think
company.
Gawker was in on, but what is the chances that this whole thing was set up in terms of, we're going to get a sex tape, we're going to leak it to somebody.
We're going to make it
fucking
easily
sue them?
accessible so someone can take it. Yeah.
What are the chances of that?
I think it relies far too much on someone having to leak it. And
But how hard is that, though? Because wasn't it his best friend that leaked it? Wasn't it Bubba the Love Sponge that leaked it?
that
Yes,
apparently it was stolen from Bubba the Love
Exactly,
Sponge.
that's what I mean.
It's just
Possibility.
Gawker,
I don't know.
The reason this lawsuit is happening is not because Gawker posted the sex tape or the clip of the sex tape and their article about it. It's because they were told to take it down and refused. So
they got a cease and desist and they didn't.
You can't sue someone for posting something right away. You can sue them if they choose not to take it down once you've had a legal order to take that down.
Why wouldn't they take it down and risk that big?
They claimed that it was because Hulk Hogan was a public figure. This was a newsworthy item that the public deserved or needed to hear about. That was their defense, basically.
But once it gets up, everyone sees it in the first week anyway, so it's not really of value to you anymore. Why put yourself through these legal battles when it's already out there?
It's in circulation, you know what I mean? Like, it'll be on all the streaming sites and whatever.
Because by keeping it on their site, it's traffic to their site. They take it down, the traffic goes to
ad
other
revenue.
sites.
It's everything.
I suppose,
This
So it was
is
a gamble on their part.
a very big lesson
And a gamble that they lost.
to journalists, which Gawker is not. I mean, they're
That's a very-
parasites.
yeah,
You know,
term
it's a lesson to them and people who have sites like that, and it's a big win for celebrity privacy, and that's something that they've been fighting for years with the advent of social media and the internet in general, and people chasing them around. There's always been the National Enquirer or People Magazine or all these things, but it took some time to get to the newsstands. Whereas now everything is up in a heartbeat. There's stories, and everything's shaped within the span of a 147 character tweet.
And I think the level of seriousness that people took, like National Enquirer and newsstand shit in the 80s and 90s, you'd be like, whatever.
You didn't believe it.
You didn't believe
People
it.
see the Enquirer and they think it's BS.
You see shit online, you're like, huh, no shit, eh? You know what I mean?
If it's online, it must be the truth.
Exactly, yeah. People have a lot more, I feel anyway, that people would have a lot more tendency to believe, things that they see in their Facebook feed than something that's in the Enquirer, because the Enquirer is just notorious for having stories about, Bigfoot and aliens and whatever, and then there's celebrity gossip mixed in there. So
it comes in from either a brand they trust when it's on their Facebook feed or their Twitter feed, or a friend has retweeted it who they trust.
Oh, he's never steered me wrong before, so this must.
So since you're in media, does this change how journalists behave now? Like, is this like a landmark thing?
It's not. It's precedent setting in a way. I don't know if it's any more precedent setting than what just happened. Even just a couple weeks previous with Erin Andrews and her getting that huge payout because someone taped her. Colluded with the hotel she was staying in and basically taped her changing in her in her room
Does it still exist?
and leaked it. I'm sure you could find it online if you chose to. But she was able to win $55 million for that lawsuit. Hulk Hogan walks in and wins, $140 million through his lawsuit, and it's just, a couple instances back to back with celebrities getting big claims for their privacy being invaded.
The moral of the story is try to get famous and just flaunt yourself naked and accessible at all times. So
see, here's the thing. My buddy's a lawyer. We talked about this, right? The whole thing is intended privacy. If you're somewhere where there's intended privacy, then that's where it comes in. If you're fucking someone in the change room at Sears, and someone records it, you can't sue them because you're somewhere where privacy wasn't intended.
So Travis, you
could sue them if it was the Sears security camera footage that was leaked.
Exactly.
You could sue Sears because that's not public. Public consumption. So if Kim Kardashian got famous by leaking her own sex tape.
Keeping in mind too, Hulk's never going to see that $140 million. So not all of it.
Well,
because there's no bankruptcy, he's never going to see that.
Yeah, people can't pay. The last $25 million. $1 million was ordered to be paid for by the owner of Gawker's website. $100,000 went to the editor at the time that article was posted, and the editor, AJ something, basically was given a net worth by the courts of negative $27,000 because all they have is $27,000 in student loans. So that $100,000 is never getting seen, and the rest was
25
to the company owning Gawker.
So if I was bankrupt the company and open up something else.
If I was going to make them come mow my lawn for the rest of their fucking life, come mow my lawn every Sunday.
So he'll see something, but it won't be anywhere near 100.
It's a weird world we live in that sense. Like, I completely believe in freedom of speech. Say whatever you want.
Sure.
Lord knows I do, and often too much.
Happens.
But in a public eye where you can be so damaging of somebody's reputation, everyone's like, oh, you just sue them for defamation of character and this and that. It's not that easy. And you have to prove that money was lost. There does need to be some kind of moral standard within the media industry to not be damaging people's reputation in their personal lives. There has to be some line that's crossed. Is there a way to ever go about that in the legal system to do so without breaking freedom of speech and the ability to write about what you want?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, this is a pretty. I think things like this, like I said, it's pretty cut and dry. This guy is in his own house, and someone illegally obtained this footage, of him on his private property, right? So that's not okay. It's not
Did he know it was being recorded?
I don't remember.
That was the other thing too. I don't know if he knew it was being recorded.
No, that was him dropping M-bombs. He didn't know.
Just in general though, like stories in general, like if TSN 1290 were to go and say, we spotted Kevin Cannon doing cocaine and fucking hookers at the Brick House before the podcast.
They saw that.
And they went and reported that. No, it didn't happen. And yes, it is a defamation of character. But you now have to prove that it was like a loss of income and this and that. Like, is there not a way to put a moral standard?
It's tough.
That's already built into journalism, right?
Yeah.
Like we said, Gawker should not be the people that are held at journalistic standards because they are not journalists.
Right.
These are college kids or the people who work at TMZ that have no journalistic training whatsoever and yet are put into a position where they're supposed to uphold these standards they know nothing about.
No.
People who are at TSN 1290, the Winnipeg Free Press, CTV, they are trained journalists. They know what they're supposed to do. They know their caps and spelling when they're writing an article. They know how to check what sources they need to have, and if they don't, it lands them a loss of a job.
Yeah, I was going to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but especially with someone as big as TSN. So if you were to report something falsely and it would come back on you as falsely, would that not come back on you from your bosses? Would your bosses not?
Of course, it damages yourself, your own personal brand, and it damages the credibility of the station. We look. Several years ago, back when I was attending Red River for creative communications and in journalism, we had the biggest probably journalistic event in the city that I can recall was Scott Taylor, and he was busted for stealing,
for plagiarism,
plagiarizing from a sports writer in Philadelphia, and he immediately lost his job from the Winnipeg Free Press.
Yeah.
Basically, blacklisted from journalism.
Yeah,
5
years ago.
You cannot steal people's work, and
I completely missed this.
We saw recently in the MMA world with Kenny Florian stealing someone's work, and Fox basically pulled him off television and said, we're suspending you indefinitely. This is not something you can do. And that's just stealing another person's work.
So when you say, just refresh me on the Scott Taylor thing, 'cause it's local, he took someone's article and just put his name on
Multiple
it.
article.
Yeah, it was not the full article, it was sections of
it.
How do you even fathom trying to get away with that in this day and age?
It was more
so
it was just from a local
Yeah, local
like
Philadelphia.
from Philadelphia, yeah. So
Who's going to piece that together, you think, right?
Right.
And eventually someone did, and then once you have that one, like, an MMA fighter taking steroids, once you pop once, that pulls into question every fight you've ever had that you weren't tested for.
Sure.
And that's Scott Taylor. Every article you've written is now under question because, we could go back, but we can't search every article ever, but we found this one, and now you're blacklisted.
It's kind of like any time in the justice system, anytime there's, something comes up where something wasn't done properly or correctly by whether it's by a police officer or a judge or what have you, it's like now suddenly every case they've ever done, it's like is now suddenly being looked at because if they made this mistake once, how many times did they make it before? And that's how.
Unless you're in Manitowoc County, making a murder.
So it's
what really bothers me about this whole situation is I have seen portions of the Hulk Hogan sex tape, and to this day, I still have not seen the Sonny sex tape.
I tried to find it when just the other day. I tried to find it. It's not on the streaming sites yet. Like I guess it's still.
Is it out already?
It's out for
you guys need to
purchase.
You guys have to work on your interneting ability.
I guess so. I don't know. I'm almost.
It's out there.
I'm almost 40, man.
I haven't tried looking for it. So
is it on the black internet or is it actually on the internet?
I found it on the regular internet.
Yeah,
the journalist and wrestling fan in me, the guy who grew up looking at Sonny, I've got Sonny's poster in my basement for crying out loud.
Nice.
I just had to dabble, and don't dabble. Just let this one lie.
I did find
let the sleeping dog lie.
I did find the Carmen Electra's nude wrestling stuff. I'll send you some links to that. Though.
Was it as good as we had hoped?
No.
No.
No, there's too many like bodybuilding chicks in it and shit where you're like, yeah, and they're like, and there's one where like two of them are having like, the Lex Luger pecs flex. Two of them are doing that face to face with their tits back and forth. These are like, ding, 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 like back and forth. I'm like, that's not attractive whatsoever.
Yeah, but it's impressive.
It's impressive. It's unique, I'm like, I don't think that's.
So you give a thumbs down to the Sonny tape?
China's is better if that gives you a better review.
Oh, really?
Every person I've heard has given a thumbs down to this.
No,
What's the Coles notes here? Why is this so bad? Like, this is a dream come true for so many men that grew up pleasuring themselves to Sonny.
1996 Sonny is not 2016 Sonny.
Which is to be expected, but is it just because of that? Because appearances declined? Or
part of it's effort, she's not putting in effort.
Well, she's probably drugged all hell, right?
I can't report on that as a journalist. I don't know the truth. I'm just going to comment on my perceived, what her effort is perceived by me, and I don't think
so. After watching
she's giving it her full effort.
So after watching it, you wouldn't be interested in still having sexual intercourse with her if given the opportunity?
Or doing that thing where you pay her to...
Really? Wow!
Or doing that thing where you pay her to FaceTime and, like, diddle herself.
Cuddle with her or something, even,
No, she has a gimmick where, like, I don't know.
Skype.
You Skype with her, and she'll do whatever you ask her to for however long your time you pay for is. Yeah.
That's heartbreaking to me because I always said she would fall under the doesn't matter how old she got just because she was such a strong influence.
You know what?
You would have to just to say you did.
This could be a good thing for you because this probably has deterred a lot of men's interests in banging her.
Booker.
So now you've got a lot less competition for booking her. Say, you go wherever in the States and she's there and you're like, okay, a lot of guys are like, I've seen her video, I don't want to fucking plow her. And you're like, well, I still fucking do. And then you know what I mean? You'd have way less, competitors to bat away.
I just wonder what is the line that gets you removed from the WWE Hall of Fame? Because we have not had an official removal yet. Hulk Hogan was kind of whitewashed from the website, but he's still officially in the Hall of Fame after his racist comments came out.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's ever been removed, has it?
That's the thing about what does it take?
Has Sonny been whitewashed yet?
No, not really.
So it's okay to drop an inappropriate racial slur, but to get naked and plowed by dudes on camera is okay.
Apparently, that's what the WWE is telling me.
You'll be okay, Travis.
You'll be alright.
I've done none of these things.
On camera.
When we put Bobby J in the Winnipeg Hall of Fame, you can go into two of them.
Yeah.
So we've got Abdullah the Butcher in the WWE Hall of Fame, and he's of course had the accusations of passing hepatitis C on to wrestlers knowingly. And Sonny, of course, with the sex tape, and Hulk Hogan with the sex tape / racial remarks, and all three still remain. So I just what is that tipping point? What does the PR nightmare have to be? I guess Sonny's didn't. It's
I wonder if the
who
case,
cares, right?
Yeah.
No one's talking about it.
the
Yeah, it's
cases
not.
it's happening after, it brings more attention, I think, to whitewash it than to just leave it alone. Whereas if you say inducted, if Sunny wasn't in doing this,
Oh, yeah,
probably
that's a different thing.
doing this would probably guarantee her not going in.
Yeah, we'll never
Like,
see China in the Hall of
yeah,
Fame
no.
because of that.
Not
So I
soon.
think it's just a case of.
But
You
even
really
if-
want to bring attention to it by saying, okay, we're not letting Sunny in, because then people are going to go, okay, why? If they don't know about it, they're going to go, okay, why
well,
not?
what's their issue? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
Like, but
better
even-
to just ignore it and.
Even if you go back 2 years ago to when they put Ultimate Warrior in the Hall of Fame, there was the whole early 2000s, early to mid 2000s when he was doing, I don't know if it was a podcast or just kind of little rants.
Well, he did it was at a university.
Yeah, the university. He was saying some pretty fucking offensive shit.
Homophobic slurs
yeah.
and stuff
Oh
like that.
yeah, like even beyond that, like even just
And
like
those existed on his YouTube channel.
yeah,
as
yeah, oh
well,
yeah,
you know?
yeah, and like he was burying Hogan, like just yeah, same deal, like and he was not pulling punches. He was talking how. We would talk on a road trip, calling him a fucking faggot and this and that.
I would never say something.
No, I mean how I would talk to you.
Oh, yeah.
Like, burying someone else. But you know what I mean? Like, he wasn't that many years removed from posting this shit. And like you said, it was probably still on his YouTube channel. But they just kind of, whatever, don't acknowledge it. Just acknowledge his time, what he did in the
I
company.
think as long as the
Yeah.
mainstream media isn't making a big deal about
Yeah,
it,
exactly.
it didn't really happen.
Who
Exactly,
are these people
yes.
that care though? Because every person on the planet has said something inappropriate. It's just a matter of who's been caught on tape saying it or not.
No, not me.
So who are these police that are going, oh, you're out because you said these things? And chances are they have probably said something that
Oh,
somebody
sure.
would find offensive at some
Well,
point.
damn well Vince has. Like,
Everybody has.
He's notorious for having said
Whether
that.
you
to comedians.
meant it like legitimately or
Yeah.
not, or jokingly, it's been said. And that's what I don't understand. Like when you see like these political campaigns and these races, like, oh, this person has this kind of background, they said this once upon a time, they've done this.
Yeah.
I'd rather vote somebody in that I know is a legitimate human being that is like me and says things that are inappropriate sometimes and is a real person than trying to believe that there's these picture-perfect people
I
out
think
there
that's-
that have abided by the book their entire
Well,
life.
that's
Because
the whole.
not real.
That's
Yeah,
the
but-
Bill Clinton theory. That's why Bill Clinton was so over. He admitted to smoking weed. He admitted to dodging the draft. He got fucking blowjobs in his office. He was over, man. Everyone's like, "Hey, yeah, there's a
Here's the
normal
thing, though, Danny.
dude."
When
you
was
know?
the last time you voted?
5, 6 years
The
ago.
last
Yeah.
last time they came out with the new flavor Mountain Dew.
You're not. I'm not saying you're wrong, but people with similar with that same idea, maybe they're not people who vote.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like people like to think that it's.
Do people really believe these people exist? Like, are there actually
That's what I'm
people out
saying.
there that think that? Like,
Well, even in our election right now, like those guys that came under fire for their like crazy, well not crazy, but like offensive tweets where they would just call women bitches and stuff.
yeah, Jamie Hall was getting
Yeah,
in for
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Sorry,
And then they tried to, shift it over to Wab Canoe, who has had a past history of through his rap lyrics and the life he led previous to
stuff
him
like that.
releasing his book and getting into
Yeah.
politics and basically turning his life around. People tried to bring up that past and it didn't work.
And I think
It's different in every case. You
Yeah.
never know how it's going to work out. Well, you can try slinging mud and someone might be able to deflect it, and someone might not be able to.
If I went to 2 sales meetings and I sat down with a guy that was legitimate and talked to me like a human being, and if he was maybe a little inappropriate at times and said things off the wall, I would trust him a lot more than the person that sat there and lied to my face with a
with
straight
the used
face.
car salesman.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
But
more
what
genuine.
works for you might not
Not
work for the next
no,
person who
yeah.
sits down in that
Exactly.
chair.
But I think in politics is a little different because smear campaigns are such a huge angle that everyone takes on everyone, that they're kind of, everyone's got some kind of fucking dirt that their opponent has dug up on them, and a lot of
Because
people
every
just
person on the planet has
dirt, and especially in the information age, it's not hard to access it, right?
Yeah.
That's why the American election right now is so fascinating because, Donald Trump has no new dirt.
No.
There's nothing that's been out about
What are you
Donald
going to
Trump
say about him that hasn't been
because
said
he's
already?
been in the public eye
Yeah.
all of these years,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
more so than any other political candidate. So there's no dirt people can dig up on Trump that hasn't been
And
already
he's
out
over.
before.
And he's like saying inappropriate things all the time, and people are embracing it.
I think in the States, if anyone votes for Hillary, they're a fucking idiot. She couldn't even control her fucking husband. How's she gonna run a goddamn country? Like, why the fuck would you vote for her, man?
It'll be a very interesting race when it inevitably is Trump versus Clinton, and it's fascinating to watch that. A country that has elected two 2 WWE Hall of Famers are in the governor's office, and Jesse the Body Ventura and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then you could have a potential president that is a WWE Hall of Famer, which just baffles me to no end. That
the battle
Donald
of the
Trump
billionaires,
could lead the country. And I'm not saying Donald Trump would do a good job or a bad job. I don't know. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, like every other president before him.
He'd hire on like Bobby Lashley as like the Secretary of Defense because he helped him at WrestleMania again.
It's more laughable to me that people think that making a big stir about what these people say and have done in their life actually matters. Like whoever's the president is just the face.
Sure, yeah.
They're not the person running the country and making decisions.
It's a decision.
There's so much money in that country.
It's a decision by committee, man. Like,
and by committee I mean people that have the money in that country, whether it's the bankers or...
That's the thing, is he has the money in that country. He is one of those people.
Yeah, right?
He is one of those people, so that's why people are
he's already making the decisions.
That's what I'm saying. That's I think why people are so intrigued.
But your vote matters, but it doesn't matter. Like, the people with the money make these decisions, and what they want is what happens. It's as simple as that.
That's how it is.
It really is. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to talk some of the movements in TNA wrestling and some new free agents that are on the market.
Oh, okay.
Last year or so has seen some major changes in professional wrestling. WWE scooping up the biggest stars, Nakamura, AJ Styles, the Bullet Club's on their way there. Ring of Honor has seen some new faces, so has TNA. But in a very shocking development in the last couple of days, it was announced that Eric Young and Bobby Roode have both requested their release from TNA Wrestling and received it. So you got two guys that were with that company for 12 years that have opted to move on to greener pastures, so to speak. Where they're going to end up, we don't know.
CWE.
I've been in contact with them in the past. TNA booking price tag that comes with TNA talent makes it a little hard to do sometimes.
I've done some shows with Eric Young back with Ernie kind of thing. He was a lot smaller then. But yeah, he was a cool guy. Like there was a group with him that would come in from Ontario, like him, Matt Bomber, Hippie Floyd Osborne. There was like 4 or 5 of them that all come from Cambridge or wherever it was he lived.
These are two of the last remaining guys that were there from the beginning. Like Abyss is still there.
Abyss and James Storm now are kind of
and James Storm even kind of ventured out for a little bit, but
came back.
Wasn't getting the money he wanted there and went on back.
I've heard that they're both WWE bound in terms of NXT. I definitely see Bobby Roode. I've always looked at Bobby Roode and I've said this guy is a main event WWE talent. Just they need to get a hold of him and give him a chance. He's got the mic skills. He's got the body. And now that he's gone with the long stringy hair and he's got the short haircut, he's got the full look to me. Bobby Roode's a main event player. Eric Young, I've never been sold on. I've never been high on Eric Young. Him getting over has involved him stealing other people's gimmicks that they've done in the past. His most recent run in TNA almost was stealing the Daniel Bryan gimmick.
Like, who would steal Daniel Bryan?
I just have never believed in Eric Young's a dime a dozen talent, and I don't see him lasting in NXT or WWE, whereas Bobby Roode, I think he's got a real strong play to get on the main roster.
So you think both of them will end up there?
I think they'll both be in NXT, and then Bobby Roode will reap the fruits of that far more than Eric Young will.
Bobby Roode to me was always the TNA guy that you're like, that's the WWE guy that never got the WWE run. Mm-hmm. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets that because he is almost 40 or just over it now. So he's not, in the prime of his career, so to speak. Eric Young, I don't know where fits into that equation in terms of the current WWE product, just because he has been booked so sporadically and so many, not sporadically, with so many different
diversified.
That I don't know where he would fit in terms of the way the current product is now, but he definitely has tons of experience. So if they're trying to be a touring brand, what they're trying to do with NXT, he's a good guy to put with the guys they're bringing up through their system to work with in terms of somebody who's got the years on them to guide young talent.
Maybe they should
make the argument that he's a jack of all trades, though. If they,
100%.
You know what I mean? In the sense of like,
he was kind of like
the longest
TNA.
time he was TNA Santino.
Yeah.
So they could use him in that route if they want to on the main roster, or he's done the more serious. He could be the James Storm veteran working with the younger talent in NXT.
And he does carry a name to the fans that NXT
is
recognizable.
He's switched so much and done so much in TNA that there's a million different options of where they could plug him in.
Yeah, that's a good point. He has shown a full scope of character and the different things he can do.
Is he going to be headlining WrestleMania?
Him and Shark Boy are going to come back.
It is interesting, all the WWE guys that WWE has signed, and obviously they never expected NXT to turn into what it has.
No.
It's been a complete marvel, and it shows you what you can do with an hour of television time a week and simplified booking strategies.
Yeah, they basically expected it to be OVW or,
Yeah, they could have gotten this away a lot. If they would have put FCW on TV, I mean, they had the WWE network back then. I have no doubt that FCW could have gotten over the point that NXT's gotten over to, too.
Their developmental was a lot different back then, though.
But if you watch the old FCW TVs, which I hope they do add to the network at some point in time, you still see the foundations of what NXT would become. It would have needed a little bit of tweaking, but
polish,
even if you watch the very, very early, like maybe the first few months of the NXT shows before when they're at Full Sail, but before they had the Performance Center and all that, the lighting was different, the canvas was different. It still felt a little bit more like a developmental show than now, whereas it feels like it's a developmental show, but they're literally
got some gloss.
They're doing it exactly like I've heard from different wrestlers that Triple H has Full Sail set up exactly the way Raw is set up.
Yep.
Like all the spacings and everything, like he has it all set up so that it's an exact replica, just on a smaller venue of what you would do on a Raw, so that when they are getting ready, it's the same thing. So they can get plugged onto Raw or SmackDown, and the differences aren't quite as noticeable for the talent.
And it's not just for the in-ring talent. This is for the officials. This is for the cameramen.
Yep.
This is for the production people.
That
they can all get a feel for what it's going to be like to work on the big show at some point.
Even at the Performance Center, they have an entranceway set up, so you can work on your entrance down the ramp. Like, it's insane the level it goes to now. I would imagine they would have to have something on the table from WWE. I guess it's rumored there was pay issues. Whether that's true or not is unknown at this time.
Yeah.
But Bobby Roode or Eric Young at this point in their career are not necessarily a fit for Ring of Honor. They're not a fit for Lucha Underground.
No.
Global Force is still not really up and running yet, and they both have that strong connection with Jarrett, but there's really nothing substantial there right now. So you would think that they would have something in the works in order to ask for the release and move on. Bobby Roode is a guy that never went to. He used to do a ton of dark matches. Like you can look up. There's dozens of Bobby Roode Sunday Night Heat matches.
Yeah, we're gonna Crash Holly and Stevie Richards.
But he was always kind of given the runaround of like, oh, cut your hair, dye your hair, change this, change that.
Hair.
Yeah, and he would always come back and do what they said, and they would never have a job for him. And then he got the opportunity with TNA, and from what I understand, there was a job offer once his first TNA contract was up to come over, but he stayed loyal to TNA, who finally gave him that opportunity in his big break after WWE kind of dicked him around for so many years.
Yeah.
And then by the time that contract was done, he had established himself there well enough where he was making good enough money at a way lighter schedule than he would make working for WWE. So
I think with the advent of NXT and the fact that you have Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins and you have Daniel Bryan and CM Punk and AJ Styles now, and you have all these guys that were independent stars that WWE has taken and allowed them to embrace that side of their career and take what they learned there and further develop it in WWE, and WWE get behind those wrestlers. It's shown a lot of these guys, and with NXT being there, that this is a different company than it was 10 years ago.
And they're not forcing these guys to repackage themselves either.
You've got Samoa Joe being called Samoa Joe. You've got Austin
AJ
Aries
Styles
being called AJ Styles, keeping his name. You've got Shinsuke Nakamura coming in. It's not the same company it was, and I think a lot of these wrestlers that have been around and had tryouts with the WWE before, AJ Styles is a perfect example of that worked matches for the WWE back in the day. He was on WCW as they faded away.
Turned down a developmental contract.
He was offered a contract when he left TNA before going to New Japan, and it was just financially it didn't make sense for him.
He was offered one after WCW as well.
Yeah, so but go out, you made a name for yourself, and then things change. Now he's making hundreds of thousands of dollars with the WWE, and they're far more willing to take a chance on a guy like Styles than they were 5 years ago.
Yeah, it used to be a bad thing if you had that TNA name to you, and that's all you had to you. You look at a guy like Chris Harris, who's a world champion in TNA and going to be their big star, jumps to WWE, and granted he wasn't in the best shape when he got there, as proven by the 1 or 2 matches that are out there, but he was a big fish in the TNA pond, and they kind of demoralized him when he got there.
Monty Brown.
Monty Brown was getting over, and then he had that family issue that he had to basically go and take care of his sister's children. But he
I loved
the
him,
position
man.
that he
I
was
thought he
in,
was
I
fucking
think
awesome.
that Marcus Corvon character, despite being a part of ECW, had a lot of potential to
I was
make a big splash.
I was disappointed with that, but I thought he was fucking awesome, man.
So it was almost like an industry thing where it's like, oh man, if I'm a TNA guy and I go there, I'm going to get buried, like I'm not going to be used, just based on the past successes of guys that were there. But now it's so open where they're pushing. Like AJ Styles is going to be on WrestleMania this year. That's insane. Like I never would have ever expected that.
No, 3 months into being with the company.
Yeah, I never would have expected him to be there. And if I had to say he was going to end up there, it would have been in a small cruiserweight role. Or
that Andre Battle Royal.
Yeah, so to see him getting featured is really cool. You mentioned Nakamura. I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts, being a fan of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Where do you see him a year from now in WWE? What do you think they're going to do with him?
Yeah, I mean, I've been following New Japan for a few years now, and I actually went out last May to Toronto to catch the Global War show with ROH and New Japan Pro Wrestling, just so I could see Nakamura and Okada, these guys, and Tanahashi as well, just these guys that you hear about and you get to watch in Japan, but think, when am I ever going to get the opportunity? And you seeing them in the ring and how they work and the charisma that they're able to carry with themselves is just completely, changes the way you look at them even further. And Nakamura is a guy who you show him to somebody who even likes wrestling just a little bit and something, or doesn't even follow wrestling at all anymore, and he just grabs them. He comes out of the screen and just grabs a hold of them and says, "Look at me." His mannerisms are completely unlike anything else that anybody is doing. He openly says, Michael Jackson and Freddie Mercury are his heroes. He models his wrestling career after them, and who would think to model your wrestling career after 2 of the biggest music stars in history? But
2 of the biggest queers too.
He pulls it off. he's able to do things that no one else can do successfully, and I love his style in the ring is almost secondary. It's a very hard-hitting style, and I don't know specifically how that will translate to the WWE. They are billing him as the King of Strong Style, which is what he was in Japan. They are building up the Bomaye knee that knocks people out.
I think Travis mentioned it the other day when we watched the clip for that. Like, whoever would have thought you would hear the King of Strong Style on WWE?
I think you'd hear who would think you'd ever hear just the word strong style on WWE television? Period.
Yeah,
crazy.
That show, that NXT TakeOver Dallas show is, for many people, going to be the highlight of WrestleMania weekend.
Fuck yeah.
You've got Nakamura debuting, you've got Austin Aries with his first match, you've got Samoa Joe and Finn Balor in the main event. I mean, so many things. It's an indie it's an indie super show under the WWE banner, and this is a jumping off point further to this huge global cruiserweight tournament they're planning for the summer. I mean,
well, that's what the Ring of Honor show would have been at the WrestleMania weekend. So they've taken all those top guys and they made their own super indie show. So it's gonna be tough. I imagine Ring of Honor and Evolve and these companies still have their followings and they'll still do okay business, but it's got to be intimidating for them to go in there now and go. We got to go up against WrestleMania, which is what's drawing these people to the area anyways. But now we got to try to put our best foot forward and compete with a Nakamura and the Samoa Joe and
do you maybe find another market instead of doing the let's all go to the WrestleMania area because there's so many wrestling fans? Do we go? Okay, well, WrestleMania's in here this year, so let's go to this other wrestling market and say, all right, well, anybody who couldn't travel to WrestleMania, let's have this big, huge convention here, and that
might not be a bad idea.
You know what I mean?
Like last year's WrestleMania, the one in California, they drew 300-400 people or something like that. It wasn't impressive because they were going against the Hall of Fame ceremony.
Yeah, if WrestleMania's in Texas, it's like, okay, well, let's go to New York, Philly, that area, and say, let's have a convention here for anybody who couldn't make it to WrestleMania, who couldn't get tickets.
I mean, the good thing is, being down to WrestleMania, is there are so many seats for WrestleMania, so many people going for WrestleMania, and there aren't enough seats for NXT. NXT's running an 8,000 seat building. They're not doing the arena that Raw's in, and of course, WWE Dallas Cowboys Stadium is going to hold 80,000 plus people
Oh, yeah.
the night of WrestleMania. So there's going to be 20,000, 30,000 people that might want to go see a wrestling show that can't get into NXT. So WrestleMania weekend, there's going to be people that can see Ring of Honor or Kaiju Big Battle or the Wrestling Super Show card they do at WrestleCon. There's lots of homes for these guys to go, and you mentioned Evolve, and they've got that partnership with WWE in terms of acting almost as a feeder system into NXT.
Yeah.
And they announced last week Regal was on Evolve and basically said that they're going to be doing the qualifications for this global cruiserweight tournament through Evolve.
Yeah.
So very interesting partnership they've got going there.
He's not just doing Evolve either. Like, he was at another wrestling show this weekend. They had their debut show. I don't know where it was, but it was called Tier 1 or something like that. And I remember hearing that he was at that show too, and they actually announced on the live pay-per-view that, William Regal just showed up during this match.
Yeah, Regal's pretty much got free reign there. He's brought a lot of these guys in that are carrying this NXT brand. He's scouted them out.
Yeah.
That have been independent successes and brought them to Triple H and said, you got to sign this guy, you got to sign this
And
guy.
they just let them be themselves.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it. Like, for years, being an indie guy was a bad thing there. And you had to really have somebody pulling for you to get a look if you were an indie guy. Like, guys like Punk were a rarity when he was there. They do all their scouting through other channels. So it's cool to actually have them going to shows and scouting guys out, because that's where you see a star in action. Like, going in and doing a camp is one thing and being able to show you're technically sound, but seeing a wrestler captivate an audience is how you tell if somebody's a star.
When you were down there, I can't remember the guy's name for the life of me. There was a guy there too who was an O-lineman for the Houston Texans just like a year or two ago. Do you know who I'm talking about? How was he? Was he
awesome.
Was he like in ring wise? Like, I don't know,
Yeah, really good.
Really picked up. He's a huge motherfucker.
Yeah,
right?
oh yeah.
Fuck, I wish I could remember his name. It's on the tip of my tongue. Whatever, but you know who
Yep.
I mean, eh? So because that kind of seemed to be what they were doing for a while. Like, they'd find someone that would fit the look more, and then
try to teach him to wrestle.
Try to teach him to wrestle rather than vice versa, And
Yeah.
and there's a happy medium, right? You can get guys with these wicked work rates, and they look like a kind of Joe Schmo, so to speak, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
no matter how good his work rate is, that's not going to work for us. Or you can get these bodybuilders that can't do fuck all, and you got to try to find that medium, which I think a lot of these guys
I was actually
have.
having this conversation with someone on the weekend. It's something I've heard a million times before, but he heard it from somebody and he mentioned it. But it's the old thought process is it's easier to teach a bodybuilder how to wrestle than a wrestler how to bodybuild. And that was kind of that was the thought
Well, I
process
think
for
now
the
with the drug
longest
testing, yeah.
We talked about this NXT TakeOver show, and like I mentioned, all those big indie guys that are making their home in WWE now. But one of the guys I'm most excited to see is that Austin Aries match with Baron Corbin, who is a guy they built from the ground up, and we've watched on NXT week after week. He get better, get more comfortable in his character and what he presents on TV, and he's come a long way. And they're working on that now with this Elias Sampson guy, who's still fairly green, but this drifter character that they're putting out there, Chad Gable and Jason Jordan, the American Alpha, Enzo and Cass, they've got the Revival tag team that they've got going right now. These guys get lost in the shuffle. They're not these big names, but the WWE is doing a phenomenal job developing guys from the ground up.
That's why they're developing so well, though, is because you get to work with these guys that have been traveling the world their entire careers, performing in front of different crowds and have different styles of wrestling. Where for 10 years, it used to be all guys in developmental that were brought in and trained from scratch, wrestling each other every night. You're not going to get any better if you're wrestling guys just as experienced as you. So now they've got guys like, a Baron Corbin wrestling Samoa Joe, wrestling Austin Aries, instead of wrestling that guy that started at the same time with him in developmental that had no wrestling experience. Mm-hmm. They're getting in the ring and doing these house shows with guys that have world experience and can actually teach them,
guide them, and
as they go. And that's
the way nuances.
That's the way the business used to be. If a guy was green, put him in the ring with a guy who was experienced.
Yeah, it was almost
on the loop. And
it was almost silly to put two green guys against each other.
You'd never do it.
No, you wouldn't do it. It'd be,
You'd always have the old Carpenter veteran that would, maybe a little past his day, but still had value in the ring to work with the young guy underneath and get him ready.
Who's that in CWE? Is that Furpo as well?
He's everything.
He's everything.
He's our main event if we need him.
Yeah,
he's a mentor, a friend.
Yeah. A lover.
A lover, probably for Sarah.
For Sarah.
Who are the guys you think that are going to come like who's the next batch of call-ups from NXT, the post-WrestleMania
Enzo and Cass.
call-ups?
Enzo and Cass, Bailey.
Bailey's going.
Bailey's got to be.
I imagine Baron Corbin will be a WWE project. Like I don't think he's an NXT for life. Like
I think he's a long-term prospect.
I think they're grooming him for WWE.
I don't think he's going up.
I don't know why,
but he will.
I think Finn Balor's got to be on his fucking way there, man. Like he's.
Depends on what they do with the Bullet Club.
Yeah, I think if
Yeah,
Balor goes up,
if-
he goes up with Anderson
with-
and Gallows, and it's a
But
fight.
if they're going to be touring NXT more aggressively, like as time goes on, like he's like the guy for
He's a
that
headliner, more or
brand.
less.
Unless they
Yeah.
transition to Joe at NXT TakeOver, and Joe carries that
Sure.
torch for the next 6 months until.
Yeah, I guess with Aries and Nakamura there now, they could make
I
that
think the Bullet
trade
Club
off.
thing gets more buzz on the main roster than it does in NXT. Because it's not
Oh,
really-
100% it does.
Cause
Yeah.
Sure.
Besides it being a bigger deal, like the Bullet Club fits with NXT. It's an indie thing, you know. Like everyone talks about how NXT's like a big indie now, and the Bullet Club is like this thing, you know, that internet fans love, right?
It's the indie NWO, right?
Yeah, so the Bullet Club being slotted on the main roster to me feels like something different and new. So I think it gets a lot more buzz, not just because the main roster is a bigger product, but it gets more buzz because it kind of fits in NXT where it's something different on the main roster. So I think you get more buzz. On
Plus,
the
you
main
already
roster
got
doing it.
you know like styles and stuff up there, right?
As we talked about roster changes, we started the conversation with Rude and Young leaving TNA. Where does that leave them in the sense that they just lost Kurt Angle,
Yeah.
they lost Eric Young, Bobby Roode, guys
I
are
don't even know half the guys on their
guys
fucking
are leaving
roster
left,
now,
right,
man.
and center. They're in a position right now where they lost a lot of their major star power, but they don't have the resources to go out and do a big hiring spree like they did.
Apparently they just signed 16 people. As soon as they announced that those two guys were out, they announced they signed 5 new. The only name I've heard is a Canadian from Toronto, Cherry Bomb.
Good.
Was one of the ones that
And
announced.
then we talked to April Hunter on our podcast, and she said when she was offered a contract, it was for very little money, no health insurance. It did make sense for
And
her
they were
to-
expecting her to do all kinds of shit that she couldn't do, wasn't
So
comfortable doing.
they're not in a
Yeah.
position to be hiring big name stars, but it's not necessarily the most appealing for guys that don't have name value to them yet that
No.
might want to hope to get on with a WWE or an NXT. So where does that leave them in terms of generating new talent for
I don't know,
themselves?
man. Like I am fucking shocked they're still in business. To be brutally like
9 lives, man. It's
Yeah,
the cat with
yeah,
9
like
lives.
how-
TNA has done the best job of surviving that any company
Yeah.
in history has.
Because like with WWE hiring and they're hiring by the boatload, Ring of Honor's got so many top talent locked up now. Like, there's not a lot of guys that Global Force is still blooming in the background. Lucha Underground has so many talented guys under
Yeah.
contract. There's
And
not a
TNA
lot
has
of
TNA has
leftovers.
tried doing the whole bring on some legends, bringing in Hogan, Flair, Steiners, Nasties, whoever the fuck, and then it really didn't do much for them. You know what I mean in terms of rating and I'd put a few more eyes on their product, but they'd see it and go, oh, okay, well, that's what it's about, eh? And that'd be it. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't a lot of build from it. They didn't build a company by paying boatloads to these guys that command a huge salary. Your Nashes, your Halls, your Hogans, your whoever kind of thing, right? It didn't help them. So I really don't see them going that route again. Like I really don't see them going like, hey, who are the?
Well,
who are
nobody left.
There's
from
nobody left from that
I
era.
think as
Yeah.
far as like signing new talent, though, I think like we're now at a point where because of AJ and all these other guys that have been signed from there, like you said, it used to be like being a TNA guy was a bad thing if you aspired to eventually go to WWE. But now you're seeing. Obviously, I can't keep up with their product. It doesn't air in Canada really, but I try to keep an eye on everything going on. And there's tons of talent who are simultaneously working for TNA and NXT right now.
Yeah, it's just weird too.
There's James Storm was, he's been back and forth on both. Austin Aries was still airing on TNA when it was announced he jumped to NXT because they were taped so far ahead. Santana Garrett's been bouncing back and forth on both repeatedly. There's tons of indie talent that are just kind of doing both. It's almost like it's now become where TNA is the biggest indie. Like a lot of people aren't afraid to work for TNA anymore.
I don't even know if TNA would be the biggest indie. I think Ring of Honor has passed them in terms of the pecking order. In terms,
I don't consider Ring of Honor an indie, to be honest.
Notoriety, yeah.
But I mean, TNA would be an indie. Ring of Honor would be qualified too.
Yeah.
They're both owned by big companies.
So in hindsight, if they've tried the big route where they've tried shilling out those money to the biggest, they've had literally every big name available to them. It didn't make a
Didn't
difference.
fucking do nothing.
Would they be better off running like a smaller size show with guys that don't have national exposure yet, building their brand from the ground up again, not running as big scale, but hopefully at a profitable scale because they're not having to distribute so much money to these big names.
Starting from the bottom again?
Yeah, start from the bottom. Start.
You'd have to completely rebrand.
You have a couple of you have your Jeff Hardys and your Matt Hardys.
Sure.
You have some of your stars to give you national appeal and appeal to sponsors.
Right.
But start from the scratch, from with independent talent that hasn't gotten national exposure yet, that aren't going to cost them a lot of money to have. Just run good quality shows and run good TV and build a following for your brand.
I think that's kind of the direction they're going.
Yeah.
That'd probably be their only survival.
Yeah.
I think they just crowned Drew McIntyre. I guess he's going by Galloway now, but Drew Galloway is their world champion now. They've kind of given that push to Ethan Carter III, who was in NXT for a while.
Yeah.
So it seems like they're kind of now moving on to building younger guys up. The only guy on their roster besides the Hardys that I think has like major mainstream look is Lashley. Really.
Oh yeah, and he's kind of comes and goes, right, depending on what he's doing.
I think he's
MMA
been there a
wise.
little bit.
Depends what he's doing
Buddy
MMA
Tyrus.
wise. Yeah.
Oh yes, our good buddy Tyrus.
I mean,
Oh yeah.
for TNA to even be successful, I mean, they were drawing 1 million fans when they were on Spike TV, and Spike just said, "We don't want to do wrestling anymore." Because,
Yeah.
that was their decision, and they cut 3/4 of that audience going to Destination America, and they're still sitting around that number on Pop TV. Like, you lost 3/4 of your audience. That name at this point, TNA Wrestling, like that has to go. I don't know why when they did that big rebrand with Hogan and Bischoff coming in, they didn't just call it Impact Wrestling.
I think
That's
they
kind of what they
I
do.
think
They
trying
have
to-
these both names, but it's still TNA Wrestling.
Yeah, I'm always confused on how to say it.
I
Like, am I
think-
saying is it TNA or is it
No,
just Impact Wrestling? at this
I
point?
think they don't acknowledge that it's TNA on TV. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think TNA is still the name of the company because they didn't change the name. Like it's still TNA Wrestling, but as far as on television, it's tune into Impact Wrestling.
But Galloway is the TNA champion. Like, he's not the Impact
Oh,
Wrestling
okay, yeah, that's
Is-
right.
is he?
Yeah.
I think it's still
Oh,
TNA
I think
title.
you're right. Yeah, they
It's just. I mean,
they didn't
that
have
right
the money
there
to order a new belt from
is
High
we don't-
Spots. And
We don't
Yeah,
have
should
the
be this
identity.
confusion.
We have this
Yeah.
big identity problem with this company, and it's existed for so many years now. And at once they were a WWE knockoff, trying to just compete and do what WWE did, and you can't win that battle. You'll never win that battle, and it's not. You don't have Ted Turner money to be signing the top stars away from WWE to your company. Ted Turner didn't get successful by signing away has-beens from the WWE. When he took Hogan and Savage, those were the biggest names that
Hall
he
and
had.
Nash, yeah,
Hall and Nash,
exactly.
exactly. That was the next level of guy, So
They were signing guys that were discarded by WWE already.
yeah, that we're thinking WWE was thinking these guys are past their prime now. But to the fan, that was the biggest names you had.
Yeah.
WWE didn't establish guys like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels over guys like Hogan and Macho Man at the time yet. They hadn't passed the torch.
No.
They were just hoping that we'll get rid of these guys and then we'll build these other guys up. And that's why WWE suffered so badly through 94, 95, 96. They just hadn't built up the stars yet. They were in the process of it
It
when
seemed
they
like
lost
it,
their big names. So Ring of Honor built themselves up on a strong wrestling base, and that's how they developed their fan base slowly over time. Lucha Underground, in a short amount of time, they developed a good crowd because they're doing something completely different. I can show that to a non-wrestling fan and say, this has wrestling in it, but it's like a movie.
So check it out,
Like someone,
It's a television show that just happens to be about wrestling.
yeah, like a guy was killed on Lucha Underground and just written off the show. It's
I
it's
think
a
CWE needs to
drama.
kill someone on.
It's just, and so TNA continues to do the same thing, doing what WWE does. I've watched a couple episodes of their show on Pop just to see what's new over there. What have you done differently? And it's just like watching WWE light. And it's not as good as NXT.
Knockoff,
It's not even as good as Ring of Honor, and it's not as good as Lucha Underground. So why am I bothering? There's so much wrestling out there to watch. You've got the internet, you've got New Japan World, you've got the WWE Network, you've got all of these companies within an arm's
CWE
reach
TV.
producing
CWE.
television
Yeah.
that we can access online.
Yeah.
And there's so many options that I don't have the time in the day to give TNA an hour or two out of my week. I'd much rather focus on whether it be CWE's latest TV, New Japan Pro Wrestling, Lucha Underground's 1 hour show, NXT's 1 hour show.
Carmen Electra's Naked Wrestling.
I'm gonna dedicate an hour to that.
It's just there's so many wrestling fans and they can't watch it all, so they're selecting stuff. And TNA is the last choice of a lot of wrestling fans.
It's exactly like you said. With streaming, internet being so accessible now, the options are limitless.
It's
for
interesting you
what
put it
can
that
view,
way because it almost feels like the way you're phrasing it, is, to you it feels like TNA doesn't have an identity. You know,
I don't think they do.
You described WWE, you described Ring of Honor, you described Lucha Underground, you described New Japan, but if you try to describe TNA, what...
My adjective would be WWE light.
Yeah.
You know, they're just trying to take what they do and not doing it good enough.
That's just it.
You know, you have to, and I established what those other companies had did to carve out their own little niche and then try and expand outward from there. WCW, you know, was doing the same thing WWE was doing basically. There were these two companies, and they were basically just presenting wrestling.
Yeah,
as it was in the 90s.
You could take a match off Nitro and put it on Raw and it would fit right in.
Exactly, but then it was the NWO coming out that just shook that bottle up to a point where we're going to turn this way and watch this, and then all of a sudden Austin and DX and the Vince McMahon feud was on here, so now I'm watching this, and we're just going back and forth to see who loses first, right?
Yeah.
Who takes the first step backwards, because everything is just full speed ahead, both trains, and you just can't look away from anything.
Yeah.
You know, that was what wrestling needs to be again. Will it ever get that big? I don't know. There's so much.
And then we throw MMA in the mix, and we're going to chat about that in the final minutes of the show here, because that is what you do on Sunday mornings, the weigh-in on TSN 1290. To keep it a little wrestling related, we talked about this the last week or two. CM Punk has finally been announced for his fight. Is this fight going to happen? And what are the ramifications if it doesn't happen, if he wins, loses? Where are we at right now with the whole CM Punk UFC situation?
I think it happens because UFC 200 is going to be such a fucking draw that he'll get like there's disclosed pay and there's undisclosed pay, right? And the undisclosed pay includes their buy rate bonus from pay-per-views, right? So he'd be stupid not to fight hurt on that. If he gets hurt,
Well, he won't be on UFC 200. We know that.
Oh, no? I thought
we know
he was.
that much. It was originally supposed to be. When Punk was announced for his first fight, and they had Mickey Gall win against Mike Jackson to establish that he's going to be his opponent, Dana White said he was going to put him on UFC 199.
Oh, okay.
And Punk had a back injury, had to get some surgery, very similar to Cain Velasquez's surgery.
Yeah.
And that pushed it back. So now the timetable is basically undetermined when we will see CM Punk. Could be UFC 201, 202, 203. But I'm thinking for sure we will see him before the end of 2016. Now, UFC... media has given Bellator a lot of flack lately for their freak show fights.
Yeah.
Data 5000 fighting Kimbo Slice, Ken Shamrock fighting Royce Gracie.
Yeah.
But no matter how you look at it, Data 5000 had 3 more professional MMA fights than CM Punk does. So what's the real freak show fight here?
Exactly.
It's a guy who has zero professional or amateur MMA experience being thrust into the biggest company in the world, where the most talented people are, and fighting a guy who has at least had a UFC fight. He's 1-0 before he got to the UFC. He's 1-0 now in the UFC. I really question whether CM Punk can win. And if he wins or he loses, it could be a bad or a good thing either way. But I think the best case scenario for CM Punk is to go out there and lose a competitive fight. That's the best case for him, because it gets that monkey off his back of that first loss.
Lose a 29-28 decision.
Exactly. It lets him go back to the drawing board and figure out what he needs to work on specifically, and it lowers people's expectations. It gets everything out of the way that's like, haha, you're a phony WWE wrestler, you had no business being here in the first place. The same thing happened with Brock Lesnar. He came in and he lost to Frank Mir in a fight where, he was dominating Frank, hitting him with hammer fists.
Yeah.
He got stood up, which was ridiculous, a point taken away, and then he got caught in a submission by one of the best submission artists in MMA history. Then regrouped, went in there against Heath Herring, destroyed him over 3 rounds, got the title shot with Randy Couture. He's never fought again, exactly. Got the title shot with Randy Couture, won the title, and when he met Frank Mir later on, he decimated him.
Ate him up, yeah.
So it's just a matter of CM Punk going out there, get that loss out of the way, and then people can build you up naturally, like every other fighter.
From what I understand, what you're saying is they have an easy out because he's not expected to win, never having a UFC fight before. But if he does end up losing, does that diminish the reputation of UFC?
No, I don't think
we have a guy that's never fought before. He has no professional experience.
They can always fall back on that, right? So that's why.
But then why was he put in there in the first place?
Because
the public wants to see him.
We know that, but how do you take that from a company standpoint?
I think the fans realize what's going on. And why he was signed. He wanted to do MMA. He's very open. I asked Cole Cabana about it when I interviewed him, when you guys brought him to town. And, he'd always talked about it. He did train jiu-jitsu. He was, always has been a white belt. He didn't really believe in belts, he said, but
Right.
he did train jiu-jitsu. He was fascinated by mixed martial arts. He always did a sit-down interview with Ariel Helwani once a year when he would come through Chicago, and they'd talk about mixed martial arts. They'd talk about wrestling, but you could tell he was a fan of the sport. And things obviously didn't end well with WWE, and he decided that I'm going to give this a try, and I respect that as a person. But if you're the position you're in, if you're CM Punk and you have all this name value, you're former WWE champion, you're one of the biggest names in the wrestling world, why would you go to some small organizations and lose there? If I'm going to lose, I may as well lose on the biggest organization
So what
in the world.
happens if he loses and he loses very convincingly? Does that change the
I
game?
think,
No.
I think knowing CM Punk, he will give it another try.
Yeah.
He could disappear and never fight again, knowing that he at least tried.
Sure.
But I think he'll disappear for probably a year, and just, I'm not good enough. I need to train more.
Do you think there's a reason why? And I could be mistaken here, but to me, I think that he's playing his cards very close to his chest as far as his training goes. Like there's no footage, no
videos
report, no
coming
nothing.
out.
Do you think that's kind of a strategy going into his fight, or do you think it's because he doesn't want to reveal what his holes in his game are because there's glaring holes, or
No, I think
it's just kind of.
I think it is intentional in terms of let's keep that. I mean, UFC is filming his training.
Right.
They are gonna when his fight date is announced, they are gonna put together a TV special to build up to.
And he's training with Duke Roufus.
Duke Roufus is camp, so he's got Ben Askren there. He's got Anthony Pettis there.
Yeah, Ben Askren's probably the best pure wrestler in the fucking world.
He's got guys that he can learn from. It's ironic that Ben Askren is such a great wrestler, but Anthony Pettis can't cover the takedown.
Yeah. Oh shit, eh?
He's got good people there. Duke Roufus is a great striking coach.
Yes, one of the best. That's where Rashad went. Yeah.
It's the UFC knows how he's doing, and I think that's why they're delaying. They've seen his progress, and the coaches and his team aren't going to let him go in there completely underprepared. They're a little look at him compared.
Behind the scenes, is that why it's been delayed?
I wouldn't be surprised. I think some of these injuries may be legit, but also maybe you could have fought through them. I think they're looking at it and saying, let's get this guy as prepared as possible. Like, you're training every day with real MMA fighters.
So it is going to be a big money fight, and if it goes well in terms of the overall presentation, it's going to be bigger money fights.
I think
So
CM Punk's
there's a lot of
first
money
fight
on the
has a
line here.
potential to outdraw McGregor's current numbers.
And it won't be. And
the
that won't
amount
be
of wrestling fans coming over to watch that aren't ever ordering UFC pay-per-views are the same guys that made Brock Lesnar still having the #1 UFC pay-per-view buy rate of all time.
And that won't be the main fight on the card either. They'll probably that could land with.
I could see it being a co-main event.
Yeah, there'll be a title fight on there too. So it'll have a good, for the guys that are kind of MMA purists that are rolling their eyes at this, it'll still draw them too, because you might have that, probably line up with Miocic for Doom or one of those ones where people are like, well, I gotta see that
I
one.
think it'll just draw casual interest as a whole, because Brock Lesnar is somebody that had amateur wrestling experience.
Yeah.
So he's somebody that was competitive in a fight environment. There's a lot of people that just want to watch the train wreck of possibly seeing him get destroyed.
Yeah, knocked out in 10
Because he's not a guy ever short for words, and he can come across certain ways in interviews.
Sure, yeah.
And there's a long list of people that would love to see him get his head knocked off. And that's a part of the CM Punk character and his persona and drawing the money he does. So you're going to have non-wrestling fans, non-UFC fans, you're just going to have people in general that want to see what happens when he gets put in that situation and see him make an ass of himself. So it's an interesting perfect storm.
But they will put some good fights around that Punk fight, because you're bringing in a lot of wrestling fans who may have never watched their product before, or haven't watched it since Brock Lesnar was competing, and you want to show them this is the best we have to offer around that CM Punk fight, so that maybe people will stick around and order the next pay-per-view. So it wouldn't surprise me if they have some up-and-coming guys like an Aljamain Sterling or a Thomas Almeida on the card, and plus some big names like possibly a Conor McGregor, or maybe like a Luke Rockhold, those types of guys that they're building as, these guys always give us entertaining fights at the end of the day. So
yeah, they could put that Rockhold Weidman rematch there.
Well, that's already been booked as well. I mean, they're pretty booked up to UFC 200, which leaves a lot of people questioning, like, what is going to be on UFC 200? That's the big question right now, and you've got Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz 2, which is pretty much official for that card. They're doing it again at 170 pounds, which is wacky, considering both guys don't fight at 170 pounds.
No, I think Nate went back up, didn't he?
His last fight before
it was Michael Johnson.
Was Michael Johnson 155,
right,
and Nate much rather said that he would like to challenge RDA, who previously beat him for the lightweight title. It's the fight he wants.
Yeah.
But he's happy to do the McGregor fight again because it's big money, and he knows he can beat Conor. So but doing it at 170 is odd to me. So that fight, it's not a title fight though, so you need something big on that card, and the rumors keep coming back to like George St. Pierre. What is George St. Pierre doing? Is he going to come back? And the only fight that makes sense for him is to fight Robbie Lawler for the welterweight title. So, I mean, as I have people who look at UFC buy rates and the biggest card of all time, UFC 100 still holds that record. It was George St. Pierre, Thiago Alves in the main event, Brock Lesnar and Frank Mir in the co-main event, and Michael Bisping, Dan Henderson in the number 3 spot. So that type of card can be beat if George St. Pierre comes back and you know, retakes his own record, you know, for biggest UFC pay-per-view of all time. But that speaks in volume to we always talk about WWE, give them a hard time about creating new stars. I mean, UFC has not done very good at creating new stars.
Let's just say, except for Conor McGregor, really.
And Conor McGregor created himself.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you think, staying in the same vein as the wrestling and MMA relationship, why do you think Bobby Lashley hasn't been invited to come fight in the UFC? Like, what is he, 8-2, 9-2, something like that? He's not beating complete jobbers. Like, he's fighting the James Thompsons of the world and guys like that. And I really think he still has some mainstream appeal where you can get those same kind of, you know, wrestling viewers who may or may not have ever tuned into a Bellator fight, where they'll be like, hey, you know, this is a Saturday night, let's go out to the bar, let's check out this pay-per-view, let's all go to so-and-so's place, kick him for the pay-per-view, and check out what Lashley can do in the UFC. And to be brutally honest, the heavyweight competition in the UFC is fucking horrid. The average age is 40. The average physique is Mark Hunt, you know, like the average record is 500.
That being said, Mark Hunt is beating everyone in the Bellator heavyweight division, including Bobby Lashley quite handily. Bobby Lashley is a project fighter, much like CM Punk is going to be. You know, he's got that wrestling fame, but people were never buying tickets in the WWE to see Bobby Lashley wrestle.
No.
You know, and he's shown that when he's been on Spike TV cards, he's not bringing in the viewers. He's never been the main event recently. I mean, maybe when he first debuted, he was the main event. But
1 or 2,
and he's had some trouble with Bellator heavyweights. I don't think he can beat a guy like Czech Congo in Bellator.
No, I don't think he could either.
And so going to the UFC is just like, well, you're maybe going to be a top 15 heavyweight, and you might crack it.
Yeah, that's about where
Matt Mitrione's just gone over to Bellator. Maybe they do a Mitrione Bobby Lashley fight and see where he can actually see if he can hang with a guy who was in the UFC in the top 15.
And Mitrione's really not that experienced. Like, going into the Ultimate Fighter, he had no pro experience.
No, I mean,
every fight he's ever been in is in the UFC.
Exactly, and he was a former football player.
Yeah,
Vikings, you know, it shows you that the heavyweight division isn't as deep as other divisions, but it also shows you that over a period of time you can see a guy develop his almost entire skill set in front of you and become something of a success in the sport.
But do you think Lashley could kind of be like the UFC has taken some of these throwbacks? I know Crow Cop got pinched for gassing again, so he's gone. But like, do you think Lashley could have a competitive fight against, say, a Gabe Gonzaga, and then they could kind of, you know, put that to his
Well,
credit?
I know enough about betting in MMA never to bet on Gabriel Gonzaga.
No. You're getting knocked out by Brennan Schaub. You got some issues.
Bet on him to win, he loses spectacularly. Bet on him to lose, he wins spectacularly.
Head kick you.
I don't see it at this point. I've never really been impressed with anything Bobby Lashley does. He has his wrestling that he falls back on as a real crutch. He hasn't shown me anything on the feet that shows me that he can hang and not have to fall back on wrestling. Brock Lesnar was able to succeed with that formula, but you saw as he got later in his career, and maybe the diverticulitis affected it, but when he fought Cain Velasquez and then when he fought Alistair Overeem, like, people had figured out the Brock Lesnar game.
I think in general at that point, MMA took a swing. Like, that was kind of, he came into the tail end of, I want to call it the wrestler era.
The old guard of heavyweights.
Yeah, the wrestler area, you know, like the Tito Ortizes and the Randy Couture's were that form, and the Dan Hendersons were that formula really worked. A lot of those guys didn't have stand-up game, but that was their bread and butter. And that kind of, you know, 2009, 2010, it switched to the complete fighter era. I'm just throwing these names. I don't know what you would call them.
Yeah, that's why people, you know, even in a short time he's had, but people consider Cain Velasquez the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time. I wouldn't be one of those people, but people have said that. You look at Cain Velasquez, Fabricio Verdum, Alistair Overeem, Stipe Miocic.
Fedor Emelianenko is you know, he cleaned out the top 10 that was available to him for his era. You know what I mean? Like, the only guys that were that decade's, you know, top 10 that didn't fight was Frank Mir, because Frank Mir was a company boy who he would have beat. Randy Couture, because Randy Couture couldn't loophole his fucking way out of his contract, who he would have beat. And Josh Barnett, who
Yeah, and
he would have beat. They got pinched for juicing the day before the fight, or whatever the fuck it was.
If you're looking at greatest fighters of all time, the
compared to the conversation
is Fedor Emelianenko, it's John Jones, it's Anderson Silva, it's George St. Pierre.
Yeah, compared to the competition
those
for
are
the
your
era.
greatest of all time fighters, and
you forgot Dan Severn.
Oh yes, and Dan
Severn has had a career second to none. I'm not saying it's the greatest of all time.
I think he's got like 102 wins or somebody.
Yeah, I think Jeremy Horn's up there with wins as well. But it's a guy who Dan Severn was so mad at Ken Shamrock for popping for steroids and not being able to fight him last Sunday night, and just he wanted to show people that a 58-year-old man can come out and doesn't have to look chiseled in stone, but be in shape and show up and fight and test clean after the fight.
Have a good training camp.
And having met Dan Severn here when he's worked for CWE, he's just a great guy.
And
has a pride about himself that so few people possess. He's just so proud of what he's done, and he's truly one of the great American athletes of all time. He has time in phony wrestling,
sure,
but the guy's an accomplished martial artist, wrestler. His UFC career, his shoot fighting career all over the world, his submission fighting career. It's not at all. It's a tale you would tell someone 50 years from now.
And one of the first Americans.
There was a guy who did all of this. Yeah, he would be like, never happened.
When it was more a Japanese thing, he was one of the first Americans to really do it at that level and hang with them.
Yeah, it's just fascinating, and I hope that UFC really can put something together and honor Dan Severn in some way a few years down the road, maybe in a Hall of Fame or something like that. Just throw some stuff up on Fight Pass, a nice retrospective. The things WWE is able to do with their documentary packages and their DVD sets, I would love for the UFC with their library and their production skill set to take that and start putting together some packages so these young fans can get an appreciation for these guys like Hoist Gracie, even Ken Shamrock, Dan Severn, these guys that really built the company up on their backs. I feel like so many fans don't know anything about Chuck Liddell or Tito Ortiz or Randy Couture.
Rampage even.
That I started getting into when I really got into mixed martial arts was these were the guys I was watching. So it's so many people think are new to this sport every day, watching MMA for the very first time. UFC. Whatever it is, 197 coming up will be people's first UFC event that they watch, much like WrestleMania 32 will be people's first WrestleMania that they watch. And then,
in the meantime, I will gladly put over Dan Severn to anybody that will listen. He's one of my favorite human beings on the planet.
Yeah, he's an awesome guy.
It's true. He's great.
We need to wrap up the program now. Where can people listen to you every week, and where can they follow you on social media and get in on the discussion with MMA with Mike Young?
Yeah, we're on TSN 1290 every Sunday morning, 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. It's 2 hours of mixed martial arts talk. It's the only place in the city, one of the few places in this country where you're going to find guys just chatting with mixed martial artists. We had Faraz Sahabi on the show last week with Chuck Mindenhall. This week we got Mark Ramondi, and he's talking about USADA. We've got Amy Dardashtian. She's talking about MMA finally being legalized in New York. And the week of March 30th, that weekend after that, we got Miesha Tate. Bantamweight champion Miesha Tate will be on the show. So a lot of great stuff. You can subscribe to us on iTunes. Just search for the Weigh In MMA Podcast. You can find us on SoundCloud, on Twitter at the Weigh In, and myself, Mike Young, at Mike Young 204 on Twitter.
Shout out to Big Marv, my Asian brother.
Big Marv's a pretty good guy.
He's a good guy.
I vouch for him.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining the program and bringing us a different insight to the world of professional wrestling and mixed martial arts.
We're having me. Anytime, guys.
Sure going to be chatting with you again soon.
I look forward to it.
We will be back next Tuesday night.